What's up, my name is Lesiba and welcome to episode 3 of Lesiba Listens, and in today's episode I'm going to be reviewing Muzi's latest album titled uMuzi. Let's get into it. He opens up the album with the song Zinige, and from the onset you kind of have this spaced out grandeur sort of entry point into the album with echoing chants, which I think was pretty cool and pretty iconic to ease us into the album. But the intro song has two parts, and in the later part we kind of hear this Zulu astronaut sound that we've come to love and know him for, which I particularly enjoyed myself. But the key point that I want to take away from this song is how he talks about giving yourself love, because on the album he touches on very vulnerable and I could even say sticky topics for him as a person. So self-love is something, it's one of the aspects of this deeply personal album that we're going to be dissecting as we go through it. From Zinige, he follows up with Milk and Honey and Mtunzini, which are both feel-good dance songs in the context of this album, and it will make sense by the end of the album when I say that these two songs kind of, for me, represent him wanting to sort of dance his troubles away and deal with these problems in a positive aspect. I mean, on one of the two songs he talks about how, you know, you can call your friends and it can be messed up, so to speak, but as long as he's dealing with the problems in a positive aspect of wanting to dance them all away and making and turning those ugly feelings that he has into something positive, that's what those songs represent for me. Following that, we have Problems and Light. Now, if you're wondering why I'm kind of going 3 songs at a time, it's because every 2 or 3 songs, they kind of has an overarching theme, so to speak. So on Problems, that's the first time we really hear him being vulnerable, and he speaks about his abandonment issues and how that's negatively affected him. And, you know, from a lyrical standpoint, it's interesting for me to hear a dance project that has that level of emotional depth. Not that it doesn't happen, but it just goes to show that Muzi is not a shut up and dance type of artist, so to speak. So that kind of dark subject matter kind of spills into the production, and you have this sort of locomotive, dark, relatively dark, of course, instrumental to accompany the project. Then following that song, we have the song Light. Now on Light, he speaks about how his mom is sort of this light at the end of the tunnel that's helped him deal with, you know, childhood traumas and seeing things that children shouldn't have to see, homelessness at one point even. So those two songs, well, those opening songs, so to speak, kind of show us the duality of life, and it's easy for us to want to paint life with one color, but in actual fact you have to take the good with the bad, the yin with the yang. So on the song Lights, I really love how he explored that side to say there is a positive that kind of came out of it. But more so, speaking to the track listing, the sequencing of this album is really amazing, because once you listen to it in its entirety and understand what he's trying to go for and the message that he's trying to portray in the album, you kind of have an appreciation for the sequencing of the album, but we'll touch on that a bit later. Following that song, we have NUF 1991, which I regard just as a palate cleanser and interlude before we descend into another part of the project. On Slow Lane, in comparison to a song like Problems, where he speaks about going through these negative emotions by himself, on Slow Lane we see Muzi existing in society today and kind of listening to the words of society and having that to balance that with the words of at home in the midst of all of these negative feelings that he's going through. I mean, he talks about how the world wants him to express himself, and I imagine that the world wants you to be at this fast pace, whereas someone like his mom will tell him to slow down and think about how he's expressing himself. And a lot of the times that when you try to do life at a high tempo, it's very easy for that darkness to kind of consume you, which I thought was really beautiful. Following that song, we have the song Queen, and again, speaking to the sequencing of the album, where we have songs that play on dualities, back to front, back and forth, and Queen is one of those songs. I mean, if you have to think about it, my key takeaway from the song rather was that you can experience so many negative things in life, but there are still these light things. And I think even the fact that Muzi put a child, well, not a child, a random child, that's him, baby Muzi on the cover, it kind of goes to show he's going to be completely vulnerable and completely honest, and we're going to see him shine a light on all aspects of himself. And I think that love is something you get to experience in life, even if you have dark thoughts, and how a lover may help soothe or heal you. And I think in particular, Muzi uses his music a lot of the time to heal himself. And that's why we have songs like Problems. That's why we have Your Milk and Honey that exist in the same album. Following that, the next song that I would like to touch on is the song Ooh Up. Now, almost throughout the album, we've really been talking about things that have negatively affected Muzi, and we've also spoken about how the world or the outside ugliness of the world has affected him. But that changes on Ooh Up. That's the first time where Muzi has to step up, so to speak, to choose to want to see the light. Because he talks about his friends getting him out of the hole, talks about his mom getting him out of the hole, he talks about his child getting him out of the hole. So even in the sequencing of the album, we have Milk and Honey and uMuzi, and at the top we have Problems and Light, we have Slow Lane and Queen, and now this is the point where he kind of rises from obviously a sequential point of view. It may not have been planned to be that way, but outside looking in sequentially, it really looks and sounds like that. And that's why I really love the song Ooh Up, because of its golden place in the sequencing of the album. My favorite song personally is Problems, but in terms of the sequencing rather, I love Ooh Up in its positioning and its meaning on the album. Following Ikakasi, which I consider to be another palate cleanser or an interlude, the one song I want to touch on is Timer. Now, if you aren't familiar, Timer is a colloquial word for father in South Africa. So Timer speaks to two things. He's saying he feels like he's run out of time, or his dad, as in Timer. I mean, on the song, he talks about him not being able to just write a letter to his dad to tell him that he forgives him, for everything. And that's at that point of the album, that is the most vulnerable part of the album. And it's crazy that he put that as the outro song of the album. Comparing it to the intro song, he's talking about things that are in his control. I must love myself. Whereas at the end of the album, it's kind of, you kind of feel that frustration and sadness, and that this thing that can bring him healing is something that is out of his control. And that's where he leaves us off on the album. And if you look at it in its totality, this album kind of brings us into the world of Muzi, both from a sonic exploration point of view to a lyrical point of view, where he's talking about deeply personal things, negative things that you don't necessarily want to expose to the public, but also on the side that Muzi as a person uses this art, as he said, turn this ugliness into something. This album is kind of a healing album for Muzi. Hence, the title of the album is his name, uMuzi, and the person on the cover is uMuzi. That's all I have for you guys today. If you enjoyed it, leave me with a like, leave me some comments. Till next time.